Dismissive avoidants use these sentences as exit lines, what they really mean. Have you ever noticed how a dismissive avoidant can suddenly become distant, cold, or emotionally unavailable, and then use one simple sentence to explain why they are leaving? At first, these words may sound reasonable, mature, or even completely harmless. But sometimes they reveal a deeper pattern of emotional distancing. The confusing part is that you may be left wondering whether the relationship actually had a problem, or whether they were simply looking for a way out. And today, we are going to break down some of the most common sentences dismissive avoidants may use when they are emotionally preparing to exit a relationship. One of the most common sentences is, "I just need some space right now." Of course, everyone can need space sometimes, and needing alone time does not automatically mean someone is abandoning the relationship. But when this sentence repeatedly appears whenever emotional closeness increases, it can become a way of creating distance without directly discussing the real issue. The avoidant may feel overwhelmed by emotional expectations, vulnerability, conflict, or the feeling that someone is getting too close. Instead of explaining those feelings, they may simply ask for distance and gradually become less available. Another common sentence is, "I don't think I'm ready for a relationship." This can be especially confusing when the person previously acted interested, emotionally connected, or even deeply invested in you. You may start asking yourself what changed, because the relationship seemed perfectly fine until emotional intimacy became more serious. For a dismissive avoidant, however, increased closeness can sometimes activate a strong desire for independence and emotional control. The sentence becomes a simple explanation that allows them to retreat without having to explore everything happening underneath their emotions. Then there is the frustrating statement, "You deserve someone better." It sounds like a selfless statement, but it can sometimes function as an emotional exit strategy when someone does not want to confront the relationship directly. Instead of saying, "I am scared of getting closer," they may frame the breakup as something they are doing for your benefit. This allows them to avoid difficult conversations while making the decision appear thoughtful and compassionate. And because the sentence sounds caring, you may actually spend more time trying to convince them that they are wrong. Another powerful exit line is, "I'm just not feeling it anymore." This sentence can leave you desperately searching for the exact moment when their feelings supposedly disappeared. You may replay conversations, dates, arguments, and even tiny interactions because you want to discover what caused the emotional change. But attraction and emotional connection are complicated. And sometimes, distancing begins long before the person finally announces that their feelings have changed. The important point is not to assume that you can solve the relationship simply by finding one mistake you supposedly made. You may also hear, "Things were better when we weren't so serious." This sentence often reveals something important about how certain avoidant people experience intimacy and commitment. When the relationship is casual, they may feel relaxed because there is less emotional responsibility and less perceived pressure. But once expectations, commitment, vulnerability, and emotional dependence increase, their internal alarm system can become activated. Suddenly, the same closeness they once enjoyed can start feeling like something they need to escape. Another sentence is, "I don't want to hurt you." This sounds caring, but listen carefully to what happens after the sentence is spoken. Sometimes it is followed by emotional withdrawal, reduced communication, fewer plans, and a gradual disappearance from the relationship. Instead of having an honest conversation about what they fear or need, they may create enough distance that the relationship eventually ends by itself. And this can leave the other person feeling rejected without ever receiving a clear explanation. Then comes one of the most painful statements, "I need to focus on myself." There is absolutely nothing wrong with focusing on yourself, and healthy people sometimes genuinely need time to work through personal issues. But if this phrase repeatedly appears whenever the relationship becomes emotionally demanding, it may be functioning as a protective wall. The person can maintain their independence while avoiding the vulnerability that comes with building a deeper emotional partnership. You may hear the words and immediately think you should wait patiently until they are ready, but that can keep you emotionally stuck. Another familiar exit line is, "You're asking for too much." Sometimes your needs genuinely may need to be discussed and balanced within a relationship, but emotional needs are not automatically excessive simply because someone struggles to meet them. A dismissive avoidant may interpret normal requests for communication, reassurance, affection, or consistency as pressure. The more you ask for connection, the more they may feel trapped. And the more trapped they feel, the more they may withdraw. This creates a painful cycle where one person asks for closeness, while the other responds by creating even more distance. You might also hear, "I don't like labels." Labels are not necessarily the problem, but commitment can represent emotional responsibility, expectations, and vulnerability. For someone uncomfortable with dependence, keeping the relationship undefined can feel safer because it preserves an escape route. They can enjoy connection while maintaining psychological distance from the responsibilities that deeper commitment may require. And when you finally ask where the relationship is going, they may suddenly describe your question as pressure. Perhaps the most confusing sentence is, "Nothing is wrong, I just need to be alone." When someone says nothing is wrong while simultaneously becoming distant, your mind naturally starts searching for hidden answers. You may think you should become more loving, more patient, less demanding, or more understanding, so they will stop pulling away. But chasing someone who is intentionally creating distance can actually reinforce the very dynamic that is hurting you. Sometimes the healthiest response is not to convince them to stay, but to respect their decision and protect your own emotional boundaries. And here is the most important thing to understand about these exit lines. You do not have to decode every sentence to know how someone is treating you. Whether the reason is fear of intimacy, emotional overwhelm, loss of attraction, or simply a genuine desire to leave, their behavior still deserves to be taken seriously. You cannot create emotional availability by arguing with someone who has decided to withdraw. You cannot love someone into becoming ready for commitment, and you cannot force someone to communicate at a level they are unwilling to reach. The strongest response is often surprisingly simple. Listen to what they are telling you, and stop trying to negotiate your worth. If someone says they need space, give them space instead of chasing them for reassurance every few hours. If someone says they are not ready, believe them instead of building your entire future around the possibility that they will eventually change. And if someone repeatedly uses distance as their solution whenever intimacy appears, pay attention to the pattern rather than focusing only on their promises. Because the real goal is not to make a dismissive avoidant stay at any cost. The real goal is to understand the dynamic clearly enough that you stop abandoning yourself just to keep another person close. Healthy love requires two people who are willing to communicate, participate, repair conflict, and move toward each other when things become emotionally difficult. If one person constantly moves away while the other constantly chases, the relationship eventually becomes exhausting rather than secure. So the next time you hear one of these sentences, don't immediately panic, chase, or start proving that you are worthy of staying for. Pause, listen, observe the pattern, and ask yourself whether this relationship is actually giving you the consistency and emotional safety you need. Sometimes the most powerful response to an avoidance exit line is not another emotional conversation, but the quiet decision to stop running after someone who keeps walking away. Because when you stop trying to control whether someone stays, you finally regain control over something far more important, your own emotional direction.